Hello everyone, happy Monday, or whenever it is that you're watching this. Raymond and I have been a little bit under the weather, although we are out here today about to ride mountain bikes. But pay no attention to that. Do as I say, not as I do, right? And I wanted to update you on what we have been working on, because there are two things that we have been working on behind the scenes, but also I wanted to share with you all a time lapse that I took this morning and talk you through a little bit about the gear that I used, the kind of settings that I used and why I chose those settings and kind of the composition, why I chose all of that. And then also I'll talk you through the editing process, how I put the whole thing together. And okay, so let's get started with the gear that we're using. We are currently working on reviews of the Nikon Z50, the Fuji X Pro 3, and the Sony Alpha 7R4. I've got a Viltrox 85mm f1.8 STM autofocus lens for E-mount, and there's a bunch of other stuff, but those are kind of the main things that we're working on right now. Okay, now for the second thing that we have been working on behind the scenes. It is something that I am so excited to share with you all. I don't get to share the whole thing with you all today, but members, I did share more with you. And that is that we are co-leading our next tour later this year. I am so excited, and I will be rolling it out to everybody in the next few weeks. But right now, members, I wanted to give you a sneak peek. I like to give members a kind of first crack at these types of things. And so Member Monday this week, everybody, there is a link in the description so that you can check it all out. I tell you the dates, I tell you where we're going, I tell you who we are co-leading with, and yeah, just give you a little bit of information. So that's it. I know that was a tease, but if you want to know more, become a member. And I will be, like I said, I will be rolling it out soon. But all right, let's jump in to my computer and talk through this time lapse. First things first, the gear. I was using the Fujifilm X Pro 3 with an adapter and the Nikon 17-55 f2.8 DX lens. This adapter does have aperture control, but it does not have any autofocus capability, which I'm doing a time lapse, so it does not matter. Now, the reason that I chose to use this Nikon lens on a Fuji camera is that the only lens that I have borrowed from Fuji with the X Pro 3 is the 35mm f2 lens, and I knew that I wanted something wider for this, wider in terms of focal length for this time lapse. So why not throw a Nikon lens on there? So that's what I did. And now in Lightroom, I will talk you through the settings of the photos. There were 958 of the photos, and I will tell you how I got to that 958. I'll tell you what my interval timer settings were in just a minute here. I'll also talk through composition and such, but I want to do the editing first. So settings. I was using aperture priority, and I was shooting wide open at f2.8, and I was also using auto ISO, and I allowed the camera to use the full ISO range. Now, the reason that I chose to use so many auto things in this time lapse rather than shooting in, say, fully manual is that the lighting situation was changing, and so I was relying on the camera to kind of take care of me and using the proper exposure. One thing that I did do was I told the camera to shoot at a full stop under. So I used exposure compensation. You can see in this first raw image here that the sky, it has a lot of detail in it. The land doesn't. And that's exactly why I did this, was that the sky was really going to be the star of the show. And I wanted to make sure that I had the most detail in the sky that I could. So that's why I chose to tell it to shoot a little bit under. And then something else I didn't want to change in my time lapse was white balance. So I set it to cloudy white balance. That way white balance wasn't going to be changing, my coloring wouldn't be changing during the sunrise show. Now for interval timer. I told the camera to shoot one photo every 5 seconds. And then I told it to go on forever and ever. I chose infinity. So the reason I did that was that where I am, the winds can pick up and the clouds can start moving relatively quickly. You can actually kind of see from here to here that there was change in the clouds. So I wanted to be sure to capture all those. I also had a large capacity memory card in the camera, so I didn't have to worry about running out of space. And then I chose infinity because I really just didn't know what the sky was going to do, how long it was going to look really cool. So I just let it keep going, and I went over and turned it off when I was ready to have it turn off. Okay, on to editing. What I do when I edit time lapses in general is I start with one of the photos. It really completely depends on the time lapse where I'm going to start. Wherever I feel like is going to need the most work is usually where I start. And then I usually jump around in the time lapse photos and I'll copy and paste settings and I'll do kind of go backs just until I feel like I have a set of settings that are applicable to all of my photos. There are lots of ways that you don't have to do that. There's software that I actually have right now that I will be sharing with you all at some point in the near future that'll help you out with that. Now, to paste these settings onto all of my photos, I need to go to the library. So my first image is highlighted, but I need to highlight everything else. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and I'm going to hit Shift and choose that last image. Now you'll see everything's highlighted, but my first image is just a little bit differently highlighted. You'll see it's maybe a little bit lighter highlighted. So that's the one where the settings are going to be copied from. You go to Sync Settings, synchronize all of my settings, and it is going to take a little bit of time and paste the settings onto all of my images. While that's pasting, let me talk you through composition. How did I choose to compose the image like this? So there were a few things going on. First of all, I knew that I was going to want the tripod lower to the ground rather than being up real high. There were a couple reasons for that. One, I wanted some stuff going on in the foreground and middle ground, and I achieved that by getting these bushes kind of lined up here so that I could, just so that there was some interest in the foreground rather than just the grass. In addition, I happen to love the grasses, especially when the sun comes up and it filters through all the little pieces of grass and plants, and they really light up. In this case, they didn't end up lighting up too much. Let's go to the last one. Let me show you. You can see that it kind of started to light up the grasses, but it was so cloudy that the sun just didn't quite peek through enough, but that's okay. I didn't mind. That's why I had the tripod down a little bit lower, to have stuff in the foreground and middle ground just for interest, and then also the grasses. In addition, I wouldn't normally put kind of the main feature, you know, the mountain here. I wouldn't actually, that sunset crater. I wouldn't normally put that right in the middle. I would normally kind of put it off to the side, but I liked having just this little peak of trees over here, and I liked having a little bit of the jagged tree line going along here. So it just kind of wound up in the middle. It worked because these bushes were, I think, were more important to me than putting this off to the side. Also, there's a road just right over here, so there's only so much I could have moved my camera either way, really. Let's go ahead and move on to exporting because we are all finished pasting. So everything's still highlighted. Let's go to export. I have a preset here that I have file namespace LR for Lightroom. That's just how I designate photos that have been edited. And then I already have a folder already to receive my photos. And then when I do time lapses, I do choose to export as a TIFF file, an 8-bit TIFF file in this case, because these photos are going to get compressed again when I put together the video and compress that to share with you all. So just kind of trying to keep the maximum amount of quality. So while this exports, let's fast forward. Now I'm going to create the actual time lapse in Final Cut Pro. There's a lot of ways to create time lapses. This is just how I'm going to do it this time. So I pulled everything into a new project here, and I need to create an event. So Fuji X Pro 3 Sunrise time lapse. And then I select all of them and drag them in. And then once they're all in my timeline, I create a compound clip. The reason I do that is that I'm able to retime the entire thing without having to do photo by photo. So I do that by selecting the compound clip and then retiming it. I want it to go fast, but I want it to go way more than 20x. So we're going to do a custom time of, let's say 50. This is still not going to be fast enough, but it'll get us started. One more thing I need to do is scale this. I want my photos, my time lapse, to fill the screen. So this isn't the most exciting time lapse I've ever done, but the sky looked real pretty and I did like seeing the clouds moving through the sky. The only two things I would have done differently are to, one, use an app like PhotoPills or TPE where I could see where the sun was going to rise. I actually have those apps and I just simply didn't use them on this morning because of reason, or rather thing number two that I would have done differently. That second thing I would have done differently is get out earlier. I kind of hemmed and hawed a little bit in the morning before I headed out. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go. It was really cold out. In fact, it was like 24 degrees when I was finishing up my time lapse. So I just would have gotten out there earlier. I would have gotten a lot more of this beautiful sky early in the morning, and I also would have had the time to think about, okay, where's the sun going to come up, and actually use those apps. Okay, everybody, that is it. Thank you all for watching. Members, check out Member Monday this week, link below. And if you aren't a member, there is a join button down below. And if you don't see that, there's also a link in the description. So that's it. Thanks everybody for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.